every day you and I get bombarded with negative news. Just like the body becomes what we eat, the mind becomes what we're putting in. It is important to listen to stories that not only gives you hope, but also inspires you and uplifts you. In this podcast, we're interviewing experts who will break down the solutions to the world's most pressing problems. And I promise you, if you listen to this podcast, you will not only stay informed, but you will also feel more energy in your life. Welcome to Great.com Talks with. Great.com is a philanthropic project where we're donating 100% of our profit towards the most effective cause areas like protecting the rainforest, funding climate change technology. And if you want to help us make even more donations, the best thing that you can do right now is to subscribe to this channel. And the topic of today is the new generation of schools. And to understand more about that, we have invited Davis College, who is operating with a different education model. And we're going to talk more about that. And our guest today is the CEO and founder of Davis College, Elizabeth Dearborn Hughes. So Elizabeth, welcome to this interview.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Elizabeth, if we talk about the problem that you see that I guess that you want to maybe help solve, what would you say is the problem that you're working on?
Yes, so Davis College is in a way a new institution that officially launched in 2020 to educate young men and women in Rwanda and East Africa and to provide them an affordable, market-relevant higher education. But when I say that it's new, it's actually the evolution from 11 years of operating as the Akilah Institute, which I started in Rwanda as a college for women. So after 10 years of only educating women, we made the decision 6 months ago to expand and include young men, and thus the name Davis College. So our mission is really about educating the future leaders of East Africa and preparing them for rapidly growing and emerging industries, but doing it in a way that is affordable and accessible, because unfortunately higher education is still a luxury out of reach for the majority of East Africans.
So 13 years ago when you started Akilah, I guess problems that you were seeing was inequality, maybe gender differences, and so was that the way to help reduce that gap?
Yeah, my story and the story of Davis College and Akilah Institute is so inextricably woven with the story of Rwanda, because I moved to Rwanda a little over a decade after the genocide and the civil war of 1994. And not many people know that in 2008, Rwanda became the first country in the world to have a majority of women in parliament. So the commitment to gender equality, to women's economic participation, has been a key cornerstone of their reconciliation strategy and rebuilding their country. And yet when I moved there, only about 1% of the population was able to go to university. And there were many reasons for that, but a very small percentage of those students were women. So we opened the Akilah Institute in the beginning of 2010 in order to target young women who, at that time, many of them were genocide survivors and had lost their families. And yet Rwanda was on the cusp of this renaissance in a way. It was quickly becoming this hub of innovation and technology and growth for the whole continent. And so there was this hunger for education, but specifically an education that was preparing them with the skills, both technical and leadership skills, for this new economy.
So I'm guessing, drawing from all of that experience now, Davis College would be, is that the way to also start to change Western culture or Western schools systems?
Yes, well, what we have seen such tremendous impact over the last decade in Rwanda and educating East African students And we realized that we had created this model of affordable higher education that was relevant and necessary far beyond East Africa. So, actually, in the 54 poorest countries of Africa and Asia, less than 1% of low income young adults go to university. So, again, the pathways to continue on to tertiary education are so limited. And then, as we see this year, how economies and countries are rapidly transforming, there's even more of a need now for young people to have these skills that are directly related to new industries and new jobs. So, we absolutely believe that there's a lot that has been learned and proven in a Rwandan context that can be replicated beyond Africa.
If we talk about Davis College, the education, the model that you kind of are operating from, could you, if you read on the website, it says every element of Davis College has been intentionally designed to create a radically different education experience, replacing traditional education methods like large group lectures and more. Could you help us understand more? What does that mean, the model that you're using?
Yeah, so one practical example is our approach with competency-based education. So competency-based education, or CBE, is really all about measuring the real learning and the outcomes rather than the amount of time that you're putting into a classroom. So certainly the education that I had growing up in the US and a more traditional university, everything revolved around the number of hours that I went to lectures, the credits that I received from that course, and that would apply to my degree. And then I had a transcript that showed what scores I got in those courses. But if I had shown that transcript to an employer, it wouldn't really tell them what I had learned or what I could do. It could certainly show them how good I was at taking tests and sitting in lectures and absorbing content, but it wouldn't show how I could apply that knowledge to real world problems. So, competency based education is designed all around giving students the opportunity to demonstrate their skills and apply what they're learning in the classroom through a variety of ways to real projects. And then the knowledge really builds on top of these projects, build on top of each other, and give students more pathways to self mastery and creates a more customized learning experience, because you and I both learn in very different ways and different paces. And we shouldn't hold one another back. You should be able to move on more quickly to the things that you're good at. And I should be able to get more help in the areas that I need help. So having all, not only the structure, but then the amount of real-time data allows our instructors to provide a more targeted and personalized approach to each student, depending on which competencies they need help with.
That's exciting to understand that you would look for the competences that's supposed to be used in society rather than what I can absorb in my brain. So what would a day look like if you describe, because I guess then would people not go to the same class, or people just going to, how does it look like a day?
So I would have answered this question very differently a year ago. I think all education institutions have been turned upside down in 2020. So prior to the pandemic, we offered a blended learning model so that students are doing both online and offline. So it would vary across course and module. For 7 months in 2020, we were 100% online. And that this is for just to paint a clear picture of who our students are. The majority of our students come from outside of the capital of Kigali, so they come from rural communities. Many of them don't have electricity or internet in their homes. And so if you had told me a year ago that we would have basically a week between when the Rwandan government announced that schools were being closed and then when it happened, if you had told me we had a week to pivot our entire model online, I would have said that that's impossible, just physically because of the infrastructure available. That's impossible. And yet we did, and our faculty was extraordinary, and our students were able to adapt very quickly. So last year was online for 7 months. We reopened in October, so now we are sort of back to normal life, although not really. And so it's still a mix of online and offline for most of our programs. But I would say, to give you a picture of what the daily experience looks like, I'll also point out that one aspect of our model that's really different is that when education leaders have tried to expand higher education in Africa, they've really tried to kind of copy and paste the global higher education model, which normally entails big buildings, fancy campuses, big sports fields, beautiful, wonderful facilities, right? And those have tremendous benefits, and they come with a very large price tag. So if the government is not subsidizing that expense, then you have, at least in the US, the case where private education is extremely expensive, so inaccessible, or it comes with lifelong student debt. So we've really tried to, in our commitment to affordability and access for low-income students, we've really stripped that all away. So a student that comes to our campus will see a very simple building and no fancy sports facilities or big fancy libraries and buildings. We keep our physical footprint as small as we can in order to put those resources into our academics and our technology, and also to keep our costs and tuition as low as possible.
To help me understand what do you see for the future here? I guess you already have the model in place. What do you expect Davis College and Akilah to look like in 10 years?
Well, I think one area of really important growth for us is looking at new academic programs. And another unique aspect of our approach is working really closely with employers. So we really measure our success by how can we prepare young women and now young men to move directly into the workforce or to launch their own careers. So we're constantly getting feedback from employers about our alumni, but also where their needs, their talent needs are. So earlier last year, we launched new programs in cybersecurity and in information systems and networking, which those are careers and industries, I would argue, that didn't even exist in Rwanda a decade ago, or less than a decade ago. And yet now we're seeing this tremendous growth across the region in cybersecurity, digital finance, digital health, drone delivery, robotics, like these new industries that are growing rapidly overnight. And employers, of course, see that one of the greatest constraints to their growth is trained talent and young leaders that can step into these roles. So I see a lot of opportunity for growth in these new industries that more traditional institutions are not necessarily training young people for. And then, of course, a big part of our growth and vision for the future is scaling to reach more students across East Africa and beyond to offer the life-changing opportunity of an affordable higher education.
Would you say that we're running towards down there in this interview? Is there anything extra important that you would like to empathize or something that you think we missed so far that is important to understand?
Yes, I'll say something that is very important to me personally, and I think for you as well, is in the last several years, as I've started to understand more about the impacts of climate change in Africa, I see so clearly how directly relevant it is to young people's education, that it's directly impacting their future careers. And in a region where still with this growth in technology, the majority of people are dependent on agriculture. And so the impact that climate change is happening is so, or that it's having is so real and tangible. And young people in Africa, I would argue, understand it in a much more practical way than young Americans do, because they can't hide from it. They can't ignore the impact that it's having. So we've really woven sustainability and adaptability, and climate issues into our curriculum, so that young people understand the global issues and the global problem around it, but also how they can respond and solve local environmental issues along the way in their career.
Mm. So you're almost saying that once this generation then goes out to the market and start to work, it's quite an advantage for the world having people who've been understanding climate change from a practical term and also been educated in sustainability, which might not be the same leverage in American school system or
Absolutely.
So what kind of support would you appreciate, or what do you want people to do after hearing this interview?
Yes, we encourage people to follow our progress at daviscollege.com or at akilahinstitute.org. And we invite anyone to join us in our monthly giving program, where for as little as $10 a month, people can support a young woman or a young man to have the life-changing opportunity of pursuing their education.
So let's say I would go in and give that contribution of $10. So what would that give for a student?
Yeah, so it goes directly towards our costs of our technology and our teachers, and helps provide a scholarship to every student. So students do pay a small amount of tuition, and that doesn't cover the full cost of their education. So every monthly gift goes directly towards a scholarship, and again, that targets students that are coming from rural communities, with 70% of our students being the first in their family to attend higher education. So it really is giving a life-changing gift to a future leader.
Elizabeth, thank you very much taking the time, clarifying the work that you do. And yeah, I feel like inspired that I could really relate to the education system that you portrayed from American college. Hearing that people will be educated from competencies, that makes me excited. I also read that you're using artificial intelligence tools to provide real-time insights about students' performance. So you're using very smart tools to help the students.
Yeah.
That was also exciting to me.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to share.